cultural engagement is never about perfection until Jesus Christ returns. It's about doing the best you can with the options you have. And those who have a deconstructionist critical mindset, it's always, well, this is wrong, and this is wrong, and that is wrong, and that is wrong, and this should be different, and that should be better. And it's, yeah, okay, but if you're going to tear it down, the question is, do you have a plan to build something better? Well, it's a wild time on the political conservative right. And you would have thought after Donald Trump wins the election that conservatives would hang together and push together for an agenda that would benefit the nation. Instead, we've got unprecedented infighting and arguing and dividing. And if you're a conservative, let's say you're a Christian conservative, you may be throwing your hands in the air asking, what in the heck is going on? What you're seeing is the emergence of the woke right. Let me explain exactly what is happening. So it's not just about left versus right. Another paradigm through which to evaluate everything is the two primary categories of philosophy historically. That is construction and deconstruction. For me, my minor in college was basically philosophy and rhetoric and debate. And you may have heard about something called postmodernism, and postmodernism is a philosophical school, but really at the heart of postmodernism is something called deconstructionism. That's really the heart of it. And so within traditional theory is the corollary, it's the counterbalance to critical theory. So traditional theory is about building, critical theory is about deconstructing. And so what you're seeing is that deconstructionism was prevalent on the left. They're deconstructing gender. There's not just men and women. They're deconstructing marriage. Now, it can be a man and a woman and a woman, and they're going to push toward polygamy and age of consent next. They're deconstructing Christianity. So these would be your apostates and your social justice warrior pseudo-Christians and your James Tallarico types. They are deconstructing family. They're deconstructing capitalism. They want to push for socialism. They're deconstructing one nation under the Christian God and even evaluating one nation under the Islamic demon. And so what has been happening on the progressive left is deconstructing of Christian values, Western civilization, and criticism and deconstructing. And oftentimes it starts by finding someone who is an empathetic character, that their narrative is compelling, and maybe they've had some hardship or something happened to them that made them feel like a victim, and then to create empathy and compassion, and then re-architect or deconstruct the entire system to prevent that from happening to them again. You're seeing that, for example, recently there was in California a dude competing in girls' sports and won a bunch of events. And of course, the parents of the girls who are competing against the biological male are frustrated. But then afterward, there is a LGBTQIA alphabet soup rally, and the mother of the confused gender dysphoria boy gets up and talks about how he's been victimized and he suffers and how hard his life is. And so we need to deconstruct gender so that her son, who thinks they're a daughter, can compete in sports and dominate girls. And it's like, well, that's just classic deconstructionism. One person doesn't feel like they got justice, so we need to deconstruct the entire system, and then we go on to critique. Deconstructionism is easy, and it's what lazy people do, because tearing something down is infinitely easier than building something up. So traditional theory is about building something, building a family, building a church, building a ministry, building a business, building a civilization, building a culture. That is hard work. Traditional theory, it compels people to go build things and improve things. Critical theory encourages people to go criticize things and deconstruct things. And so previously, most of deconstructionism was largely on the left, and we would have called it woke. But today you're seeing deconstructionism on the right. Why? Because it's the party in power. When you're a minority group, you hold together for survival. When you're the majority group, you can start fighting over resources and power and platform and influence. So what you're now seeing is the emergence of the woke right. And this would include Candace Owen trying to deconstruct Turning Point USA. That's exactly what she's doing. This would include Tucker Carlson trying to deconstruct largely the neoconservatives who have historically been in an alliance with Israel, and he doesn't like that. And for some reason, even though he says he's a Christian, he seems to have a little fetish for jihad and Islam and Muslims, and so he's deconstructing neocons. What you're seeing as well, you're seeing a deconstruction of support for Israel, which is why Daily Wire's got layoffs and their viewership is down, and they're in a tough season because now they're up against deconstructionism on the right toward Israel and the Jews. And so you're seeing it over and over and over and over and over. You're seeing deconstructionism on the right. You're seeing it with Nick Fuentes, who's trying to deconstruct MAGA. That's what he's doing. And so what we're seeing now is not just left versus right, but we're seeing traditional theory versus critical theory. We're seeing construction versus deconstruction. The problem with deconstructionism, whether it's the woke left or the woke right, number one, it's negative. It's just tearing down. Number two, it's easy. If you've ever done any construction, demo is easy. You can hire a gorilla to do demo. Finished carpentry work is really hard. Building something is tough. Tearing it down is lazy and easy. In addition, what happens when you're in a deconstructionist mindset, you can get so fixated on perfect that you overlook what is still better than the alternative. And so let's say right now that everybody wins and there's no TPUSA and there's no MAGA. And then what do we got? Well, then we got AOC and James Tallarica and Bernie Sanders and a bunch of socialists who are completely supportive of progressive wokeism and seeking to bankrupt the country and eradicate Christianity. So what I'm saying is you may not get perfect in what you want, but politics and cultural engagement is never about perfection until Jesus Christ returns. It's about doing the best you can with the options you have. And those who have a deconstructionist critical mindset, it's always, well, this is wrong, and this is wrong, and that is wrong, and that is wrong, and this should be different, and that should be better. And it's, yeah, okay, but if you're going to tear it down, the question is, do you have a plan to build something better? Because if you don't, then what the right will do, it will deconstruct itself, and then the left will construct something that is horrible for human life and flourishing and is against our God, His word, and values. And so if you are younger, be careful, because you're going to get triggered by the anger and the frustration and the sense of victimhood, and interest rates should be lower and buying a house should be easier and gas shouldn't be expensive. And what you're doing is you're carrying the same deconstructionist spirit of the progressive woke on the left that you don't like, because they're running around saying they're victims and blaming everyone else and wanting to deconstruct everyone and everything because they feel like their life should be easier. The only way forward is traditional theory and building. You got to figure out, how am I going to build a life? How am I going to build a family? How am I going to help build my church, build my community? How am I going to help build my God's kingdom? How am I going to build a legacy for my grandkids and my great-grandkids? How am I going to build a life, a world, a business, a church, a family that cares for the people that I love and God has entrusted to me? If you are young, especially you young men, and I'm not saying it's easy right now, but I'm saying if you live long enough, you realize it's never been easy. If you spend your time just being a sort of keyboard warrior and living for a dopamine hit and getting angry and being critical and going down the rat's nest of deconstructionism, whether it's on the right or the left, you will be an unhappy person. You'll be an angry person. You'll be an anxious person. You'll think you're a victim. And you'll spend so much of your time obsessing over things that are completely beyond your control. And you may not be able to control what happens at the White House, but you can control what happens in your house. You may not be able to save America, but you can share the gospel and see some Americans get saved. The key is to do what you can do to make life as great as you can for the people that you love. And we're seeing an entire generation, particularly of young men, that have been activated and they're going to church and they're becoming conservative. Praise be to God. But we're at the risk of losing that whole generation to a deconstructionist mindset rather than a constructionist mindset, talking about all the people and things that they're critical of and want to tear down, rather than them envisioning and dreaming about what they could build for themselves and their family and their future. And so I'll just leave it at that. But it is no longer left versus right. It is construction versus deconstruction, building up, tearing down, creating something, or destroying something. And I'm just telling you, if you're a young man, don't waste these years. You're young, you've got energy, you've got opportunity, you've got destiny, you've got a future. And don't worry about criticizing and tearing down what other people have built. Spend your time and energy building what you need to build so you can enjoy your life and you can enjoy your family. That's my encouragement. Thank you very much for watching. And if you do me a solid, go ahead and subscribe and we'll get you lots more Bible teaching content.